So this album's the opposite of a lot of what we talk about. This is the major label debut for
Right.
the band that again kind of finds skate punk, and this whole boom happens the year that Smash comes out and Dookie comes out. The other big
Right.
thing that happens is the label that they're on, the band goes to Atlantic Records.
In the summer of 1994, Bad Religion gives us Stranger Than Fiction. It is 17 songs, 38 and a half minutes, unless you got the European or the deluxe version, which is 18 songs and 42 minutes and I don't know, 20 seconds or so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I tell you what, you're a pretty big Bad Religion fan, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let me read my notes real quick,
Okay.
and then you go off for as long as you want, and I'll respond to some of your bullet points, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote, Incomplete is a banger of an opening track because it is a very, very good song. Leave Mine to me is a pretty decent song, but the chorus and the bridge of it, I just don't like, man. It just takes me right out of it. Stranger Than Fiction is a decent title track. It's super catchy and I see the appeal. I just don't care for it much. It's an earworm and simultaneously very bland. Uh, Tiny Voices. This one I like a lot. Great melodic chorus, the type of Bad Religion song I typically enjoy. Great little guitar lead in there as well. The Handshake is absolutely amazing. I love that song. It's got great lyrics. I love, love, love that song. Better Off Dead is a decent enough song. Nothing I love, but I wouldn't skip it. Infected kind of stands apart a bit. It's more a slower, brooding riff to begin with. Stays at a lower tempo. It's got parts that remind me of System of a Down, and I hate that band. Conflicted feelings about this one, bro.
So what a funny random sentence. But
Dude, I mean, listen to it again with that in mind, and you'll understand.
okay.
It's a great reminder that this is a mid '90s record, and it sounds a lot like it. I don't mean that they were inspired by System of a Down either. It's just that they are the band I thought of when I heard that part of the song.
Mm.
So when I say it sounds like something, people naturally think that I mean that they were inspired by that. No, dude, System of a Down wasn't before Bad Religion, so that wouldn't make any sense. But that's what that song sounds kind of like. But
Put a pin in that point specifically because I have a comment on that. So just
okay,
we'll remember that.
this won't take a long time. I don't have a lot of stuff written down here. Television is what I want to hear, man. The song rules. I used to love the song when I was a kid. I still do.
Gee, I wonder why you like that
Dude,
song.
it's got Tim Armstrong and a Bad Religion song. Dude, yes, please. And this is like self-titled 93, Let's Go era Tim Armstrong. So this is like...
This is Lint. No, this is Lint.
Yeah,
That's
this
Lint.
is Lent.
That's Lint. That's not Tim.
So this song rules, man. Individual is also a great song. Love the vocal flow on this one. The guitar work on this record is really good, and I love the production on it as well. Hooray for Me feels kind of like a Rancid Let's Go song. All the way down to the guitar solo. I really like it a lot, but it sounds like a Rancid song to
So
me.
real quick, I know I'm not interjecting, but you'd be surprised if that's a Brett song or if that's a Greg song based on what you just said.
I would think it was a Brett song.
It's a Brett song, yeah. No, that's
okay.
that's a total Brett song. It's just funny that you said that. That's a Brett song. So
yeah, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
I don't remember this one from when I was a kid, but I sure like it a lot. Slumber, not sure why, but I just don't like this song. It's just not for me. Marked, back to something really fast and melodic, great song. Inner Logic is a driving song against the man. Oh, like a not driving car, like driving melodically, melody, rhythm, tone, beat.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I read it out loud. I was like, that didn't sound right, but it's a great punk rock song.
Not an automobile song. Okay.
Do what?
It's not an automobile song though.
Correct.
Determine that. Okay.
What it is super catchy, almost like an Offspring song. Great lyrics, and I like the riff. It has a Motorhead feel in parts of it as well, and there's a solo that's really good. It's a deep cut jam for sure. What it is one of my favorite songs on the album.
Has an Iron Maiden intro, I think, on it too. Is that the one where the guitars are?
It's the song right before 21st Century Digital Boy.
Yeah, so right at the banger right at the end.
So 21st Century Digital Boy. While I personally prefer the song before this is the one off the album. It's the song, and it's got lyrics that are as important and relevant now as they were 30 years ago. It's a great song, and the chorus is so fucking good. News from the Front is an excellent song. Super great melodic vocals, and the Hey Hey Heys, they're like super melodic. The band that that's a part of the song, like those hays that they do. Hey, how do they do it? I can't replicate it. I'm not gonna try. If it's a really melodic hey, 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 hey,
He just
no,
goes along with
hey,
the way the
hey.
chorus goes. He does
That's what it is. It's like a
the haze with it. Yeah.
hey,
News from the
hey.
front. News from
Yeah.
the front. Because the whole thing's going in a
I'm
very like operatic kind of way.
I'm
Yeah.
butchering that, but I'm doing that so that you'll understand that that's the kind of thing that bands like Authority Zero have taken from Bad Religion and
Mhm.
perfected. Authority Zero, I thought of them immediately when I heard that song. Markovian Process, decent enough song, but nothing that I'm freaking out about. The end of the US version of the album could have been stronger if News from the Front capped off the album, in my opinion. Then you have Leaders and Followers, the last track off the European or the deluxe edition of the record. This one's a good song. It's a better last track than Markovian Process, in my opinion. This one has some cool vocal melodies with two different things being sang at the same time. It's a really good ending to the album. Actually, the ability to do vocal stuff like that live is really, really crazy. It's a very, very good song. Um, yeah. Oh, also, before we go any further, I got a really big playlist on Spotify these days that needs to be talked about more on this channel. It's got like 1,500 songs on it, and I add to it weekly. So if you're interested in seeing what I'm putting on there, there's a link in the description. But man, out of that album, the songs that really, really stood out to me were Leaders and Followers, News from the Front, What It Is, and Television, The Handshake, and Incomplete. Those songs right there are ones that I like enough to like take off the record and put on a personal playlist of songs that I would listen to, not one that I would spread out to other people. Those are great songs. This album as a whole, I would say, is really, really good. Uh, I think people are going to dislike my grade of it, so I'll wait till you're done to talk about that part.
I'm interested to hear what that grade is going to be because I was surprised because I again as we talked earlier, not that you're not a Bad Religion hater, but like you're not necessarily like me where you just love that band so much that it like I don't think my analysis is ever going to be fully objective because I really do just love the band. So
Yeah.
I would tend to find that. But some things that you talked about and some things I'll interject. So the song Incomplete, I agree. I love that song. And you got to remember with this album. So this album is the opposite of a lot of what we talk about. This is the major label debut for
Right.
the band that like again kind of finds skate punk, and this whole boom happens the year that like Smash comes out and Dookie comes out. The other big
Right.
thing that happens is the band that the label that they're on, the band goes to Atlantic Records. Now Brett always there's a lot to that whole story because like Brett was with them. Brett always says, "Well, I had to write that record and then I left the band." And he says it kind of like condescending, but he's not lying. He still did write half of the songs on this album and he still participated in much of the production. So for all intents and purposes, even though this was released by the power of Atlantic Records, it was recorded like a Bad Religion Epitaph record. So it had way more resources than those records did, but it was still
Right.
basically recorded under most of the same conditions. And Incomplete, I saw that as a lead into Incomplete. One thing they learned when they did Into the Unknown, which was their prog album in the mid 80s that totally bombed, is that they wanted to still experiment. They never wanted to do that again, but most of their albums have a lot of, especially rock and roll and again like kind of opera and gospel experimentation on the albums. But what they realized is their first song though on every album has to be a punk rock song. Because
Yeah.
especially thinking back then, it's what are you going to put in the CD changer? What are you going to put on the vinyl? You're going to put that tape in, especially a band that's going to a major label. If suddenly Slumber, which I love the song Slumber, but if that's the first song, then a bunch of like angry green haired Mohawk people just throw that damn thing out the window. And like they already thought Bad Religion sold that anyway. So that's the thing they have just made known because they know like maybe every album that they do might not be totally punk rock or might not be on the roots, but they're still Bad Religion. They still want to maintain their fans. So they always make sure to sort of load that opening slot with that sort of intention. Another thing that you said, you talked about the song the Handshake, which I also love, which is another thing. All the bands that were recorded by major labels have this song on the album. So I want to say on like Out Come the Wolves, what's that? Say Goodbye When You See Me Sign, Now I'm Crucified, Businessman Gonna Shake My Hand, Show Me Numbers That I had. Same basic lyrical concept as the Handshake. When all these punk rockers were making multi-million-dollar deals, it really bothered them, and they seem to be journaling about it in their songs. They all have one song basically about this concept of like having to make a deal with the devil of like with corporate America. It was which the Handshake is about, what that song by Rancid is about. A lot of bands just have that on there. Infected. You mentioned the System of a Down thing. And the reason why I laughed at that is so this is again, so they went to a major label, and one thing that I think hurt them on the major is they kind of didn't popify. explicitly, and I think it kind of hurt them because they were a little bit older and they weren't like again as cute as the Blinks and the Green Days, so they were just sort of boring on a major. But one thing they did, if they did anything to sell out, was it was 1994. Grunge is still like the biggest music in the world. They're a major label band that comes from the underground. People are not, they're not really a lot of distinction between like the grunge bands and where they come from and, Bad Religion coming from its underground scene. But they did want to try to have a bit of a hit. So they thought Infected, let's 90s it up. Like they did that very intentionally to let's make it kind of sound like a grunge song. Not really, but that was, you picked up on what their sort of cynical, marketing, what people do to songs to try to make them appeal to its broader audience. Now, one more thing on that I'll add, and then we'll get into a few other points, is you talked about 21st Century Digital Boy. Now, the funny thing about that is that song doesn't really belong to this record. That song belongs to Against the Grain. The reason why
which song?
21st Century Digital Boy.
Oh, okay.
Originally appears on Against the Grain. Like, so most people think of that as a song from Against the Grain.
Okay. I thought that, but I think I'm wrong. And so I didn't even go check it because I was like certain I was just wrong.
So it's a classic Bad Religion song, but not, and this version isn't like noticeably different, but it's significant that the reason why it's on this album is so Bad Religions was a weird band with the major. They didn't bomb. They didn't set the world on fire. So once this record was the best selling record I think they ever did. Just by virtue at the time, but just by virtue of its promotion and stuff. But it wasn't Dookie. You know what I mean? So it was still kind of considered a disappointment. And even in the lead up to that, the producers were thinking the same thing that they were right on the Jawbreaker album. They were saying there's not a hit here. There's not, you guys do these kind of fun songs that people love and swing around to and that are getting famous. That's not, and this album is fairly dark despite some of those things. So they really didn't have that, like Brett and them, they didn't feel like they had the hit that the label was looking for. So their compromise and what the label pressured them into doing is what they make sound like, just put one of their old hits on this, one of their catchy tunes, one of their chant along to sort of like expose it then to the bigger audience. And so like no one was really offended. Like if you were offended by Bad Religion going to the major, you were already kind of offended. So no one really cared that this version was on there, but I do think it helped.
I think that's incredibly smart.
It helps the popularity of the song also though, because there's probably a lot of people a lot of people have this record, like it's not thought of as a major label album, but it was an album that if you were like a 90s, say just like like listen to your brother's radio station, you probably
that's the thing, is it was widely distributed.
Yeah, you would have had Stranger, it was at the Walmarts of its day. You know what I mean? So you would have been able to hear 21st Century Digital Boy, which came out on their third record on Epitaph, so there's a connection to that.
If you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with Cheshire Cat. You've got a problem with a bunch of the old MXPX records. You got a problem with most of the bands that do this, because most bands, when they're young, or not, maybe not most, but a large number of bands, when they're young, will put out demos and such. When they get an opportunity, they will reach back into their bag of tricks and pull out some of their better songs, re-record them, and re-release them. Because if you have an audience that's this big, and then you break, and you now have an audience this big, chances are most of those people have never heard that song anyway. So the only people they're going to even know, and then, in my opinion, you have a secret club because you're the guy that knows that song from before it became popular. And then you get to talk about the people that now are fans of this band. You go, yeah, I remember that song from this album. Check this out. And then you get to reintroduce them to a whole nother record. I personally am a big fan of doing that.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm only not a fan of it if you're like re-releasing something and making me buy it, but not giving me any like original content. Like if
I almost said, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, because like for this is, I get just 21st Century Digital Boy. I don't have to switch out my CD is basically all this is. Now, if I had to pay $20 just to hear 21st Century Digital Boy again, but with a different cover on it or some random B-side on the second, like they used to do, that was a ripoff. Those reissues
I'd rather have a single song or two on an album re-recorded than an entire album re-released with a different cover, because that is annoying.
Yeah, that's terrible. And because
and that's still okay to a certain degree, but I prefer the song in a mix of new songs versus an album.
And because the re-recordings rare, like, so this is pretty equivalent to the original, so it's not a lot of like it's like this, or say like Bro Hymn number, the second Bro Hymn, which is a slight variation of the original. I think those are different things, but generally it's like dub mixes and that kind of stuff, so it's never as good as the original one anyway, so it's not that big of a deal.
So my favorite hardcore record of all time is Terror, Lowest of the Low. That record has been released, I think, on 3 different labels with 3 different covers, and it pisses me off because I see, oh, a new terror thing, and I get all excited about it. I'm like, oh, it's just Lowest of the Low again. I'm like, dude, like that's kind of my point, is that just give us Lowest of the Low. Maybe it's like a bonus. This is an EP.
Yeah.
Record like a nice another, let's say 10 songs, and do like a 17 song album with a bonus EP at the end of it. It's like you get a 10-song album, and then you get a bonus of Lowest of the Low, their original amazing like breakthrough release, as even like a bonus disc. Do like a double LP or something. Like, you don't need to give me just Lowest of the Low again. Like, dude, put some more thought into it, put some more money behind it, especially a band as big as Terror. Like, come on, man, you guys can do that. And it may not have been their fault, or they may not have had an option. I'm not saying that it was the band that made those decisions, but
Right.
when you buy a catalog, you do what you want with the catalog. So that's probably what happened.
Shout out to Trent Reznor a couple years ago, who would just go on social media and tell you when Nine Inch Nails albums weren't worth buying, and I really respected that, because he cost
Wait,
himself.
what do you mean?
So like this happened to him with part of the Nine Inch Nails catalog, where a few times they re-released like some stuff, and he would just
Okay.
go on Twitter and be like, "Hey, there's no real value in buying this thing." So again, arguing against his own interest, he's going to get money off
Huh.
of those albums, but there was not a lot of value. Like, it was doing exactly what you're talking about.
Okay,
of
so
just
it was just like represses and re-releases of
yeah,
old
and
stuff with new artwork.
without, yeah, and not really even in the way like you or I might buy something on vinyl that's a really special version or something. It was just
Right.
it was just stuff that he said was already out there.
Yeah,
Like
and-
and I respected that coming from the artist to sort of point that out of like, hey, there's nothing here to buy. The label, he was, because he was pissed off too. He's like, I'm just being commodified here basically by. You're just selling my thing over, or you're fooling my people thinking they're buying something from me, or that I'm making new music, or I'm doing that. I mean, it happened to Bad Religion when they went back on Epitaph. Suddenly, a greatest hits of their Atlantic stuff came out. Now, Atlantic had every right to do that, but it's like
Sure.
they were totally. It's a little punching down when that band that was cool again, now that they were on the punk label, suddenly had to, like, now they were good enough to have a greatest hits on your label when
Right.
you kind of did. And that's a little bit different politically, but again, like, I think people can see through the BS, like, especially back in the day. I have enough of like those crappy like Century greatest hits CDs that weren't very good for anything, that like we don't need anymore. Like, maybe the digital revolution is a good thing.
Let me be very clear about something. If Lowest of the Low hits 25 years or whatever, and they release a remastered edition with a new cover and a booklet, it's serial numbered to like 500, I'm buying a couple of copies of that. That is value to me. But just re-releasing it for the sake of re-releasing it is frustrating to the fans, when all you're doing is putting a new cover on it, and then we don't even realize it's the same exact thing till we got home. Like, that would be really, because I mean, look, let's be honest, dude. If you're not paying attention, you could buy a record of a band if it's a different cover and not even realize you've already got it.
Right. That's crazy though. Like, there's probably people listening to this show right now that are like, "What the hell are these two old people talking about?" Because that is such an old timey consideration.
Maybe.
That probably in the modern day, you only buy something because it's like merch. You know what I mean? Like, I know you buy a lot of stuff, but I think people probably buy physical music with much more intention now. You know, I'd be like
Maybe.
the customer's probably just a little more savvy like that. But and to the point of like the record labels, this is completely off topic, but there's a reason why they weren't so sympathetic when they fell. Like, now we realize
Right.
that it sucks that they kind of fell, but like they were not the good guys in any way. Like that
No,
was
they were necessary evil, but they were evil.
that was definitely like that business. The business did suck. So like anytime
Yeah.
we talk to maybe tie it back to the Bad Religion thing, when people talk about the major labels sucking, it's not just that the music sucks; it can suck for the consumer too, in a lot of ways. And
It
that's
does
just,
suck for the consumer. I will say Spotify is a great deal, but if I could trade that in and make sure my artists got more money, and I had to be a little more picky with my music, so be it. I'll take it, because music is so watered down now, because we've got 20 million songs at our fingertip, and they upload like 10,000 songs an hour
Yeah,
or some nonsense.
I would rather live in that world though, where I had less music, but like again, the labels weren't so crappy like where the bands were just equitable, so there was just better music. Like, I would
Right.
rather live in that world.
Well, do you remember like in the 90s, whenever an album came out, even if it was bad, we still bought it and went with it for a while, listened to it, and then decided it was bad, but we know the record. Like, that's not how it is anymore.
Well, yeah. So your judgment felt, even if it was like it could be a bad opinion, but it felt way more like a true bad opinion. If you know, like if you didn't like something, like I believed you. And
Right.
now when you don't like something, I just generally, and not you specifically, I just generally
No, I
assume
know.
you haven't given it a chance. And not to make like, and that person will say, no,
Well,
I
that's
listened to
probably
it.
pretty
Like,
accurate.
did you listen to it or did you like really listen to it? And again, this is something that we're longing for the past, but it's just the quality was just, I don't know if the quality was better, but you were able to be a more
Well,
discerning
no,
customer.
the quality was much better because it wasn't that the quality was better. The quality per square foot was better.
Uh,
Because now you're shoving 500,000 things in per square foot, whereas back then you only had 30. Like
well,
it just
yeah.
wasn't as much available, and so
And
by virtue of just having more things available, you're gonna have a higher number of things that suck. The
you're,
percentage might be similar, but the number is higher.
it's also environment too. Like what we love home cooked food. Not every one of our mothers is the greatest cook in the world. I guarantee you that. But you
Facts.
like necessarily the feeling of what it feels like to have that warm soup in a comfortable
Right.
like place. So that environment raises the kind of quality of the thing. So again, when you're not inundated with every song that's ever existed and just my 4 CDs there, it's a much better and conducive environment to enjoy that thing, to appreciate, to criticize it in a more meaningful way. It's funny, like we're these punk rock guys, but we sound like and we're longing for the past when it was simpler and slower. But it's hard, I think, for younger people to really understand why we care about music in the way we do with those sort of things that we put and we acknowledge like these things are kind of stupid the way we sort of care about them, but they did
To a
kind of
degree.
matter at a point. Like they did really have like sort of consequence to
Well,
them, and music
it's
mattered in that sort of way.
it's like a kid that gets everything given to them. So when I was young, I had a friend named Jerry, and we would go to the baseball card shop together. And I'm not exaggerating. I would go in there with like $10 and I would buy, I don't know, let's say 3 packs of cards, maybe 4 or 5 if they were cheaper,
Mm,
right? He wouldn't buy packs of cards. He bought them by the box. He bought like boxes of packs. That's what he. So if I bought 5 packs, he would buy like 4 or 5 boxes.
mm-hmm.
So when we go to my house, all my cards were in binders or boxes. They were all alphabetized or whatever, however I had them organized, maybe by team or number, sequential, whatever. But I had them organized, and then anything of value was in a sleeve. Anything in, like $5 and up was in a even harder plastic case, and it was all organized. I knew what I had. I knew where it was. When I would go to his house, he literally had $20 basketball cards just in a stack on a counter that was like next to a Coke
Jeez.
can, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he literally had money laying around his house. Like he just had so much that he didn't care about it. That's exactly how music is today. Music is the rich kid, and back in the 90s, it was the poor kid. Back then, we had a certain amount of it, so we took care of it. We appreciated it. Even if we didn't care about it, it wasn't very valuable to us. We knew what it was. We knew where it was. It was in our collection still. We owned all the Epitaph releases, whether we liked them all or not. We bought all the Fat releases, whether we liked them all or not. Back then, we bought a record on Epitaph or Fat because it was coming out on Epitaph or Fat. Nowadays,
You were their customer because you were a
correct.
customer of them. Yes.
Yeah, and now there's so much music coming out that you're just like, yeah, I don't care. I'll leave this one on the counter here. I'll throw this on the floor here. If I step on it and give it a crease, no big deal. I'll just get another band. Like it just doesn't matter. The bands don't matter. So like when I find a band that I really love, like let's say Bullshit Protector or Empire Down or Poppers from Houston, I went as far as to put money behind these bands because I love these bands. Not many people are willing to do stuff like that. They're not willing to go and find a small band and put effort into it and care about it and take care of it and put it away and put it back on the shelf when you're done and actually have a CD or a cassette tape and go to the trouble of having a fucking CD player. You know how hard it is to find a working CD player right now? Like it's unless you just have money because you can just buy a brand new one, but they're fucking expensive. So to do all this is because I appreciate what I've got. And I sift through mountains of this shit now to find one good album. I've went through like 65 cold oi bands to find the 5 that I wanted to talk about on my video. Like it's just we're at a point now to where as far as music is concerned, that's the analogy, man. It's the rich kid now. You got so much of it, you don't have to take care of it. But back in the day, we loved it, man. We took care of every single piece of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think like I remember reading the story of the Green Day situation with Rob Cavallo, and he was so burnt out, and I was like, that's so relatable. I think to us now because now we have that exact thing that like a record label exec used to have to do. A record label exec used to have to go through all the demo tapes and figure out what was good and what wasn't. Now we sort of have to curate that, you know.
Dude, I'm even more in yes because I own a label and I do this channel full time.
Yeah, so you
So
have
like
to do
I am
both. Yeah.
on. Okay, look. to anybody that thinks this is about you, it is not. If it's about you, I will tell you to your face. So this is just a general statement. I get sent so much bad music. So the thing is okay, how do I respond to that? I typically don't if it's really bad, because I just don't want to be rude to people. And if you're working hard on making music, I just don't want to crush people, man. I'm not into that. But there's also a thing. I'm pretty certain that a bunch of it is just young people that are it's easy to make music these days. That's not necessarily a good thing. Like, it is a good thing to a degree, but there's also a cost to that. Is that you got all these people that think that they're musicians now that aren't, and they're sending me like bullshit demos of stuff, and I'm like, would you stop sending me 10-minute jam sessions of something and calling it punk, and it doesn't have nothing to do with punk lyrically or sonically or anything? Like, stop. Just because I like punk rock doesn't mean tell me what it is. I might still listen to it. I'm listening to a bunch of Northern Soul right now. You got some kind of cool, like, old-timey R&B song that you're writing? Let me hear that. I'm interested, but don't lie to me about it. But everybody's writing music now. Everybody's making their own music now. It's exhausting, man. It's exhausting. But I love it, though. It's exhausting. I'm not complaining. I'm just more or less venting. It's just like,
yeah,
man.
it's just more. It kind of hits you when you like, of what a different world, like, because like, I don't think like we live in like the future necessarily, but then sometimes I do think about 20 years ago, and oh yeah, we totally do. Like, it's just
Dude,
a
look at
different
what
world.
look what I can do with this. The shit I can do with this is mind blowing.
We're talking about these people who are pretending to be rock stars. You and I are literally playing radio DJ right now as we're criticizing these other people for doing it.
While I understand what you're saying, I would say that we are better at that than they are at what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and we have a little bit of formal training at it and that kind of thing. But still, I think conceptually, it's still open. The internet, though, and all that did open that same sort of gate for us, though.
I mean, there's 1,000,003 podcasts now. I mean, this is why we get 300 views instead of 3,000, because there's so many to choose from. So
I mean, I think
and that's okay.
Good. We're pretty good, though, relative.
I think we do well. Yeah. Our numbers are good too, in my opinion, especially for the size of audience that we've got, and the fact that we're a niche subject anyways. So if we were getting 300,000 views a video, I would wonder why. I would be like, hold on, something's wrong.
I'm offering perks. That's what's happening.
Right. Feet photos.
Yep. Yeah.
So all right, fellas, if that's what you're into.
No guarantees on quality, by the way. Just literally my face.
Speaking of, like, coercing people into subscribing to your channel, man. You know where I'm going with this?
No, but what a segue.
Have you heard about Mr. Beast, bro?
Is he one of those kind of guys too now?
I've always thought that he was kind of a weird guy, right?
Oh,
and
no.
I don't know what is going on with him, but his buddy that is a trans woman, there's a lot going on with her.
Oh, no.
Oh, dude. The Mr. Beast empire is exploding and blowing up. I think the end has come. I always thought that it was really odd at how famous he really was and how popular he really was, and there was nothing he did that was weird. I was like, I don't believe it. And I don't even care either. I'm not even judging him, dude. The stuff that they're trying to cancel him for, in my opinion, is kind of like, I don't really have an opinion on it. I think it might be a little bit of stretching, because I don't know that he was actually doing anything. But the friend was. And the friend was doing stuff that you can't do. So I'm not going to elaborate, because I just don't want to get my video demonetized or age restricted. Is more important than demonetization. But yeah, man, weird world out there, dude. We live in a strange time. All I ask is that you come by and listen to some quality content. I'm not going to give you nothing else except, input on the channel if you're a patron member, and then you'll be on the Discord. Other than that, it's just quality content as far as I can make it.
Yeah, and no candy bars either, I don't think.
Bro, that guy's candy bars used to be like marketed as like considerably better for you than Hershey's, and then about 8 months into making them, they realized they weren't selling enough because they didn't taste as good. So they started making them like Hershey's bars, but they never pulled back on the marketing. I don't like the guy, man. I don't trust what he's doing. I think he's full of shit.
Yeah. My kids want those damn candy bars every time I go to the store, and they're
expensive. Sure they do.
So that's my beef.
My kids don't get them. I don't let them have them. I bought them one, and then when I found out about this, I was like, all right, no more of that. My kids also don't watch Disney. We don't let Disney in the house. They can watch like horror movies because, I owned a horror shop. They were just kind of around it a lot. It's a little different. But like Disney, I think, is a pretty evil company. Anyways, Bad Religion, Stranger Than Fiction. Yeah. Overall, pretty great album, honestly. So okay, this is my opinion on the album. objectively, I'm gonna say it's like an 8 out of 10. It's pretty good. There's enough like lulls for me to not go higher than 8.
Yeah.
But like subjectively, I'm gonna go like 6 or maybe 5.5 because half of it I don't care about. The only issue is that the half that I care about is so fucking good that like I'm like wrestling with how to say it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually gonna go. I'm gonna go 6.5. I'm gonna go 2/3, just because I think that it deserves 2/3 subjectively because the strong songs are so strong that they're stronger than half. They're just good. They're really really solid songs. But objectively, I'm gonna go like an 8. There's some room for improvement here in my opinion. I don't know how popular this album is within the Bad Religion community, but
It's
I think it's a
polarizing.
good album.
Yeah, it's polarizing, and it's
Okay. That doesn't surprise me, I guess.
super okay. So it's kind of weird because again, it is their major label debut, which automatically just means it's a polarizing album in that kind of way. And I think it's polarizing because it doesn't really stray much from, if anything, Generator and Recipe for Hate were more experimental than what this was.
Okay.
This was, if anything, they kind of got back to a little bit more similar to what Suffer and Against the Grain and that kind of stuff was going for, which again is atypical. I think when you go on a major label. I have this one ranked really, really high, but I totally get your criticism and I get like the label's criticism of it.
Right.
That's my same general one is like, I wouldn't really throw any one of these songs away because I like a lot of them quite a bit. And some of these songs, especially like some of those big end hits like Infected and Stranger Than Fiction, those are Bad Religion staples. Like those are really part of the catalog. But there is the record label is right. There's not a lot of like that ironic fun as much on this album as there is on some other Bad Religion albums. Now, Bad Religion, like you think of Green Day for ironic fun, you don't necessarily think about it for Bad Religion, but there's always a little bit of that on Bad Religion or a little bit more lightness. Now, there's plenty of like positive songs on this album. Like Hooray for Me is an explicitly positive song, so there's plenty of those type of songs. It just doesn't quite have that sort of. It has that. It suffers from that like '90s malaise that it's actually.
Well, even
going
look at
for.
the cover. The cover looks like a dark.
It's
90s
great. It's
drab,
just '90s.
like,
Yeah, it just it suffers from nothing that Bad Religion or punk rock necessarily did. It just kind of suffers from the time period, and then
it looks like a fucking Pearl Jam record, dude.
yeah, and again, and they were very conscious of, and that wasn't such a dirty word to them as it probably would be. Like Eddie Vedder sang on their previous record, and he wasn't famous, so they didn't really have the respect for grunge or the hatred for grunge in the same kind of way.
Jam. I be very much on record saying that. Pearl Jam
I know you do.
Sucks.
It's funny because you talk about like this time period. Graffin talks about he was it was before he switched to his other degree. He was almost getting his master's in geology, which required him to dress in flannel and long shorts and all these. He says so. People thought I was the trendy singer of the rock band who was dressed as a grunge man. I was really just a nerdy scientist, and that was sort of the standard issue of what.
That's awesome.
What we had to wear. Yeah. So that grunge album, which I don't hate it, and I think they do it very well. And I'm not as anti-grunge as you are. I do think, though, I do prefer punk over grunge because punk has sometimes a little bit more of that, like even like a song like American Jesus is somewhat lighthearted or ironic in the way that does exist on Stranger Than Fiction, but I like a hair of it more now.
Damn,
it
I would
is,
never consider that lighthearted.
Yeah, I have a weird sense of humor. I get it. But it is, though. I have trouble always categorizing this album because I think, well, it's not as good as the Epitaph run, but that's not exactly true. I would say it's not as good as the second, third, and fourth album of Suffer, No Control, and Against the Grain, because I think that's really like the Bad Religion sound. And there's big songs in Generator and Recipe, and this one as well. They just feel to be just not as first, I guess. So they have that sort of distinction. Now, here's the thing: Brett didn't tour on this album. It's still a Brett album. Bad Religion declined in the 90s, not necessarily because they went to a major. They declined because they lost half of their coaching staff, basically, where they lost their producer and their songwriter in Brett. So Greg wrote many of their hits as well, but that's one guy versus two guys and a producer. That's just a huge part of the team. So I think those albums are very good. The rest of the albums they did on Atlantic are very good. They're just not.
What other records came out on Atlantic?
So they have the Gray Race, which is also very good. There's like hardly any decline. That was one. And then they have No Substance, which is just very low regarded. Like I can't even tell you a song on that one.
It's
and
then
then
like the TV on the cover.
Yeah, it's like a TV, and there's
Like a lady on it or
a
something.
hotline being called. Yeah, yeah. And then there is New America, which people don't. It's not very highly rated, but that's the one where Brett came back for one song. They
Okay.
produced it with Rick Ocasek from the Cars. Produced it with it. It's a very well done record. It had no juice behind it because it was the last
Okay.
record on their major label deal, so it didn't really get any pub before they
Yeah, I
came
don't
back
like.
they came back to Epitaph with Process of Belief in 2002 and kind of reset the band.
So I probably heard All Ages was the first thing I heard by them, but by the time I was able to buy records, this one was being promoted, and I think I bought this album, and that might actually be why I don't listen to them like a lot to this day. I think it's just a matter of like happenstance. I bought All Ages, really liked it, so I bought this one when it came out or when it was out or when available or being promoted or whatever. And I got home and was like, oh, this isn't quite as good as All Ages, which in all reality, All Ages is a compilation, so there's no way this album is going to be as good as All Ages. I don't think.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
unfair,
not
an unfair standard. Yeah.
correct. So I just got unlucky, and so if I go back and listen to Bad Religion, there's a smorgasbord of songs that I really like by them. I just generally don't go with full albums. Suffer being an exception to that.
Yeah, and last week I had the same exact take on MXPX, so that's pretty common. It's funny though too, like there's a lot of you reminded me of something. So like guys like say like Lars and Tim loved Bad Religion, and there's a story that Greg tells in his book that he realized how much of a not punk rocker he was. That
Okay.
he knew that again, Lint from Operation Ivy was singing on their album. He was aware of that, but he didn't really know who any of those guys were.
That's
So
wild.
so this guy with a mohawk introduced himself to him in like 1993 in the hallway. Hey, I'm glad to be on your record. You're my favorite singer. And Graffin said I was being nice to him. I had no idea who it was. And then he went into the studio. He didn't snap. It was Tim Armstrong. And and Tim's not, Tim is Outcome the Wolves hasn't come out yet, but he's still in the world of punk rock. Would still be he was well enough known to be put on this album. But
Right.
again, you got to remember, Dr. Greg is the PhD student who's not really hanging. He's like 30 years old at this point, not in the punk scene.
Right.
But so for him, he tells the story, and I kind of took it like, wow, he didn't know those guys, but I think he was more amazed like what influence that the band had already at that point. And again, like guys like Fat Mike, they love Bad Religion like so much so that they based a lot of their music off it. And then again, Bad Religion reemerges in the early 2000s. So
Okay.
my generation really loves them kind of as a Warped Tour band that was alongside when our NOFXs and those guys were on their Warped Tour run. Bad Religion is a peer with them. Your generation specifically has a little bit of, I wouldn't say an issue with Bad Religion, but Bad Religion kind of sold out on their watch. And or when they found punk rock, Bad Religion was a little more uncool. They were kind of what like maybe say like a Circle Jerks or somebody like that would be thought of as today as just a band from the past. They hadn't
Right.
reset themselves and remade themselves as cool as they did in the early 2000s. So they do sort of have that. That's my very long-winded saying they have sort of like a stigma with a certain generation of fan that doesn't exist with fans like that are my age and younger or that I think are a little bit older. I think your generation specifically has like reasons to not be so blown away by Bad Religion because they were an average band for I think a lot of the time of like when you always talk about liking music in 98, 96, finding a lot of music back then. Bad Religion's
Right.
kind of at their music is good, but they're just kind of lame in that time period.
I mean, that's yeah. I mean, I agree. I a lot more alternative kids liked Bad Religion than punk kids in my high school. So I remember that very vividly, actually.
That's interesting because I don't have a really recall for that, but that had to have been true because they weren't unsuccessful on Atlantic. Like
No.
they weren't a
Like,
hit, but they were
all the kids that
bomb.
liked, dude, back in when I was in high school, if you liked Nirvana, if you liked Green Day, if you liked even heavier stuff, Slipknot, Korn, you also liked Bad Religion. They were in that company
Yeah.
because they were on that major label. But punk guys were like, yeah, we like their old stuff, but this new stuff is a little watered down for us. Like I remember those conversations, not vividly, but like I remember that being kind of a theme, more or less,
Yeah.
and that's probably another reason why I didn't care for them that much. But it is what it is. They're a great band, obviously, right? Like they're
Yeah,
a
and
legacy act.
there's such a trailblazing band that like these things that they did are not important probably for other bands, but because they did them, they have significance because they like all their moves very much shape the history of a lot of the stuff we listen to. So we have to always kind of take note of like even they did this thing and it was terrible, but it like also them not being on Epitaph probably, let's be honest, opened the door for bands like Bad Religion and NoFX to flourish the way they did as well, because they weren't sharing
Right.
with the house band either on that label. So I think it was all good. Like I think Anti-Flag, even though we don't talk about them a lot more, they knew they weren't going to stay on a major, so they went in with the idea basically as this is sort of a contract for us. Let's get our money out of this.
I'll be honest, that's the one band that I think is fucking wild that signed to a major.
But with that logic, that kind of makes sense. Like if you're gonna be them and do it as sort of a mercenary to come in to, and like they said, like they built their studio out of that. Like they had that as sort
Well,
of a business
sometimes
plan.
you can fight the system from within. I mean,
Go
look
in
at
and out.
SLC
Now,
Punk.
Bad Religion gave it a legit again, but they were only we think of them as old. They were like 28 when they made this decision
Right.
to maybe in a world where again Eddie Vedder sang on your album and Pearl Jam's the
That's
biggest band in
pretty
the
crazy.
world. It's probably not crazy to think your band might also be a huge band in that same stew. Like that could also happen to you very easily. It didn't for Bad Religion, but they were fortunate because they were punk, unlike another band that might have just come around and been a one-hit wonder and then faded away into major label obscurity. All those guys would have regular jobs now. Now the guys in Bad Religion have second jobs because that's who they are, but Bad Religion was able to maintain, I think, its fandom though, because it did come from punk. So the guys like the Fat Mikes of the world, the Tim Armstrongs in the world, they did grow up watching that. So as soon as they came back to punk, they were back in punk and kind of widely accepted because the whole time,
Right.
though, shout out to Brett, he never left. You know what I mean? Like he's still, maybe you didn't like him because you didn't like Epitaph or you thought Epitaph was corporate, but he was still there. So they kind of went back to him. So there's a lot in like the divorce of them. The divorce was amicable between the band and Brett. It was more Brett and Jay Bentley that got into like a personal argument, literally over
Interesting.
he was an Epitaph employee, and it was like
Huh.
it was something over like where he parked the forklift or something, like one of those things because you're in a band with someone and you're working with and you've just spent too much
That's
time
ridiculous.
with someone, and so that's where there was any real friction. But I do think though, like the change in Bad Religion had nothing to do, less to do with the label, way more to do with Brett Gurwitz instead donated all his talents to like the Descendants and Pennywise and all that.
Well,
in the
yeah,
late
when you
90s.
lose a staple of the band, a pillar of the writing process like that, it's going to change. It just is.
Well,
There's
and-
nothing you can do about that.
and
You
even-
can't even if you try to mimic it, it still won't sound the same.
Like Greg talks about it, like he got divorced in that time period.
Ugh.
All kinds of stuff happened. Like he was like, okay, I didn't realize it though. I went from having the job of one person to the job of two people. And he said he felt it was he was part of the legendary songwriting crew. So I got to really bring it and manage all the, like, I think they probably underestimated how easy it was to manage your band when your boss was in your band. Technically,
Right.
as was the case when Brett was in Bad Religion. You're on a major label, you are a commodity. Like there's a lot of business things, which I mean, part of why Greg moved to New York so he could be close for these interviews. And again, it's kind of a punk band that didn't fit in on a major as most of them do, but Bad Religion always has had a way of keeping themselves together enough, and kind of like they're still sort of around, and still what they pride themselves on is another band. And a lot of our punk bands, I'm really proud of our guys specifically. A lot of them didn't do the nostalgia thing and still really don't. Like Bad Religion releases albums, they tour. They could tour on their 90s stuff forever. But these bands that we grew up on, they kind of don't want to. And it's a thing that I really appreciate. Even if I don't
think
like
they're
their new
just kind
stuff.
of tired of it, to be honest with you.
Well, good for them. Good for them
Yeah.
not being tired of it, because a lot of other people.
No, I'm saying I think they are tired of the '90s stuff.
Oh,
They're just
yeah.
they're like, dude, I'm over it. I played it 1 million times.
Well,
Like,
especially these unless, okay, I understand the appeal of, I don't know, any band that like whatever it took to get like Slash and Axl back together to play those shows. Like if for that amount of cash, I kind of get that too. But
Right.
these guys would profit if they just did the nostalgia thing as well. But these are also people that, like, we joke about it, but Brett's like a record label mogul, and Greg is literally like a PhD doctor. These guys have other pursuits. Why are they going to do Bad Religion for they got adulation and fame in the other parts of their life? They want to do it
Isn't
because
that
they
weird?
still kind of want to do Bad Religion, which I think that, like, I love that Brett is still a member of Bad Religion, doesn't tour with the band and didn't take over Ian Baker's spot, but he still considers himself like, he doesn't really write songs for other bands explicitly. If he writes songs, he's writing a song for Bad Religion because that is his band that he happens to be in. So obviously I'm a Bad Religion super fan. If you want critical Bad Religion analysis, find me like in a couple hours when I'm tired or something. I don't know, but it is genuine though. I do love and appreciate this band very. So I had the epiphany. Actually, I want to end on this. So as we were sitting there, and I was like, so Bad Religion's not my favorite band. They might be my favorite lyrical band. I think I can.
Really?
I think I can declare that. Yeah.
Wow. I actively dislike their lyrical
I know
writing.
you do, but I think like I think they're great
They've got enough.
songwriters.
They've got enough that I enjoy, right? That I can't say that they're bad or whatever, right? But the way that they write lyrics, they just use too many big. I'm not in the punk rock for the intelligent side of it. I'm in it necessarily for like the arm in arm, rah rah rah. Like I want to listen to
Yeah.
ole 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 more than I want to listen to 16 syllable words. I just don't
And
have any
and I
desire for that.
understand that. So that's why I'm not saying that they're necessarily my favorite punk band or they write my
Yeah,
favorite punk song, and they're one of them
but they're
for
very
sure.
intelligent and they write
But
incredibly
but
like
lyrically, I did like they're the only band that lyrically that not the only band lyrically, but a band lyrically where I'm just like I feel so not necessarily relatable to because I'm not a scientist. I don't feel
no, but you're an
relatable to it,
educator
but
and that matters.
I just it sort of resonates with even like their stuff when it's just like social commentary and not their sort of as like Brett calls it like he's because he said he wanted to make because both guys do it. I know like Greg's a PhD, but both Greg and Brett are kind of into that sort of way of speaking and stuff. But he said I know Brett said he wanted to get away from what he called thesaurus punk is
Dude,
what
I'm
he
telling you.
called the first couple of things. But if you look at his songs, that's why his songs you can kind of tell whose songs are whose as the albums go on. His tend to be a few more of the hits because they are a little more lightweight. But
Yeah, they're easier to. Yeah, lightweight's a great
I think
description
the
of
Bad
it.
Religion fan though, Broad Strokes is probably more representative of me, like the hardcore fan. So
Right.
they have to sort of present like that way that they presented. It's not me trying to be pretentious, although it is a little bit. But I just think like legitimately, they're one of my favorite bands, and what I like most, like I like their music
Well,
plenty. What I like most about them is their kind of the way they present lyrics, and I guess their presentation. I think the lyrics are the most important part of that band, though. I think other
no, the
people
lyrics are no.
might think the music, but
Their lyrics are very much the most. If you think the lyrics aren't the most important part of Bad Religion, I don't know that you've listened to much of them.
well, I
Uh,
empathize with Greg in his book. He talks about in the '80s before punk like took off, they'd be on these sound stages, and like he would tell the sound guy at the bar like, "Hey, there's no microphone." He'd be like, "Well, it was fine for Black Flag," and he'd be like, "Yeah, but you don't have to listen to Black Flag sing. Our fans expect to hear me sing," and that sounds very pretentious, but no, he's actually that's like basically saying you go to see Jimi Hendrix and his guitar amp isn't plugged in for the night. That really
well,
wouldn't
yeah, that's
work.
fucking weird. But
Yeah.
so I appreciate Bad Religion. I like a lot of their songs a lot. I would go see them live. I was excited to see them live the number of times that I went. So
Mhm.
I, in no way, shape, or form, am trying to disrespect that band. I just am not their biggest fan, and I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
That album is pretty solid. I think I like some of their older stuff better, but good record, man. I'm glad I listened to it. I enjoyed it. Their production is always top notch, though. Those dudes know how to put out a record, man.
Yeah, especially at this point when you had Brett who just knew how to do it from the DIY standpoint with
Right.
money. Like what a combination that is to have the cash and then the that punk rock. You hear about this with Green Day a lot, like punk rock institutional know-how from doing it with no money, and then when you have money, you're really good at it.
Right. That's one of the good things about growing up with less, money, and then
You're
somehow
you're
getting a hold of some of it.
you're hardened later a little bit. Yeah,
Well, let's wrap this up, man. We've been going for 90 minutes. I
yeah.
think that's a pretty good episode. Next week, the next 2 weeks are going to be really good episodes.
Okay.
Next week, I want to hit 1999 and I want to hit 2009. So we're going to go 25
Okay.
years and we're going to go 15 years. Because I was getting kind of bored with looking at the same exact list. I was like, what is coming? We have a couple of months before we start getting back into these 20-year anniversary, 30-year anniversary ones.
The
The,
'94.
the
Yeah.
fall is when they started coming out. They come out in the summer, and you have like 2 months, and they come out for the holidays. So we have a couple of months to where we kind of have to get creative. 2009, we got the Lillingtons' Death by Television. How familiar are you with that?
Not well, but
That's what I thought. Let's go. I
it's
love the
listen,
Lillingtons.
but like it's listenable enough that like I'll get into it for a week. Like I know it well enough.
Dude, it's so good, man. And I think the 15-year one, we got two. We're gonna flip flop them, one week and one the other. I'll let you choose which one comes first. 2009, we got NOFX Coaster, and we also got Let the Dominoes Fall.
Oh shoot!
I know,
See,
dude.
because I thought you were gonna say like Coaster, and then something you thought I was gonna be excited for, and I was like, okay, Coaster, but then you
Dude, I know. I said Coaster first on purpose because I knew you also like Let the
okay.
Dominoes Fall.
I need to take a NoFX break because I'm really like
Okay, that's what I thought.
overloaded on them.
Let's go.
Let's go Dominoes, and then we'll get back on the NoFX because I need to stop listening to NoFX. I'm still in the concert hangover from them, so it's been
Okay, that's a good point. Spoiler if anybody's even still listening, dude. NoFX Coaster, probably my favorite NoFX.
I've been listening to it a lot lately too. So like even next week, I'm not gonna have I have a lot of funny thoughts on it.
Yeah, dude, that's like a top 3 at worst. NoFX.
Well, do you listen to Coaster or do you listen to Frisbee?
Coaster. What's Frisbee?
So they're the same album.
Oh, is it the vinyl?
If you buy it on CD, it's Coaster. If you bought it on vinyl, it was Frisbee. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I never had it on vinyl.
It's just a funny little.
Well, now I want it on vinyl because I wanted to say Frisbee.
There's a reason to buy vinyl to buy a physical copy of the same exact album because 100%. That's different packaging and a different fun way of a different product.
Dude, that's badass.
Bringing it all full circle. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, everybody that's hanging out with us, thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, help us grow this community. We are at 6,200 subscribers now, dude. We are rocking and rolling, bro. That 10,000 is not that far away, which is kind of a banana statement. Wow. Isn't that crazy, dude?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, man. That Cold Oil video did really well, too. I'm very proud of it. Yeah, yeah. Awesome, man. Well, shoot, dude, get to work at school. I hope you have a good week this week.
Yeah.
Tuesday still okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, man. If anything changes, just let me know. Everybody else, have a great weekend, everybody. Love you guys, man. It's been a blast. I'm having so much fun. Look forward to more of this stuff with you crazy people. Peace.